Did you know the vibrant world of medieval art spanning 500 to 1500 CE might have secrets hidden in plain sight? Did you ever wonder if the grand cathedrals and priceless manuscripts were truly shaped only by men's hands? What if much of what you learned about art history from this thousand-year stretch is actually missing half the story? And number one, erroneous belief women artists' work was solely focused on religious themes. The notion that women artists in the medieval period exclusively engaged with religious subjects is a persistent one, yet historical evidence reveals a far more intricate landscape of their creative output. While devotional art certainly constituted a significant portion of all artistic production during the Middle Ages, for both men and women, assuming women's artistic pursuits were confined strictly to spiritual narratives, overlooks a rich tapestry of secular engagement. The medieval world, though deeply pious, was also populated with daily life, courtly pursuits, philosophical inquiries, and storytelling that extended beyond the divine. If women artists, much like their male counterparts, were active participants in representing these diverse aspects of existence. Consider the role of women in the production of secular textiles. Noble women and women in various social strata were skilled in the creation of elaborate embroideries, tapestries, and woven goods that depicted scenes of courtly love, hunting, heraldry, and mythological tales. These pieces were not merely functional items, they were often monumental works of art, adorning castles, great halls, and private chambers. The Bayeux Tapestry, for instance, a masterwork of embroidery depicting the Norman conquest, is widely believed by many scholars to have involved the skilled hands of women, perhaps even nuns from a convent. While its narrative centers on a historical event, its execution showcases a detailed rendering of secular life, military campaigns, and political drama far removed from purely religious themes. The meticulous stitches, the vibrant wools, and the sophisticated storytelling techniques required immense skill and a deep understanding of narrative composition applied to a secular subject matter. Beyond grand tapestries, many smaller embroidered items like purses, cushions, and garment adornments created by women featured scenes of courtly life, chivalric romances, or allegorical figures. These objects were often used as gifts or personal possessions, reflecting the aristocratic and sometimes playful aspects of medieval culture. For example, records indicate that wealthy women commissioned or personally created embroidered panels for their homes that showed garden scenes, musical performances, or figures engaged in leisure activities. Such works clearly demonstrate a broader artistic scope than solely religious devotion. The production of illuminated manuscripts, a field where women artists left a significant mark, also provides examples of secular themes. While many illuminated texts were psalters, Bibles, or books of hours intended for religious devotion, others were chronicles, scientific treatises, medical texts, or literary works. Women, scribes, and illuminators in convents, as well as those in secular workshops, were involved in copying and decorating these non-religious texts. For example, some copies of classical Latin authors or medieval romances, which were popular among the educated elite, would have been produced and illuminated by both male and female hands. The illustrations in these secular manuscripts often depicted everyday life, mythological creatures, historical events, or portraits of patrons, offering a visual record of medieval society beyond its religious framework. Take, for instance, the intricate medical diagrams or astronomical charts found in scientific manuscripts. While these might have spiritual implications in a world where science and religion were intertwined, their primary function was informational and observational, not devotional. On women who participated in the production of such scholarly works, particularly those within learned comment communities, were engaging with a distinct genre that extended beyond the purely sacred. Their precision and artistic skill were applied to conveying knowledge and understanding of the natural world, a fundamentally secular pursuit. Furthermore, medieval women artists also contributed to the artistic embellishment of everyday objects. From finely decorated combs and mirror cases to elaborately carved caskets and jewelry, these items, often made from precious materials like ivory, metal, or wood, frequently featured secular imagery. Scenes from fables, romantic encounters, or symbolic animals populated these personal accessories. While the precise identities of the artists behind many of these smaller, highly decorative objects are often lost to time, it is highly probable that women, who were often skilled artisans in their own right, contributed to their creation. The domestic sphere, where many of these objects were used and displayed, was a realm in which women exerted significant influence, and their artistic talents would naturally find expression in beautifying this environment. Even within overtly religious works, women artists sometimes incorporated secular elements or narratives that reflected their lived experiences or the broader cultural context. The margins of religious manuscripts, for instance, were often filled with drolleries, whimsical, sometimes irreverent, figures of animals, hybrids, and human characters engaged in everyday activities. While these marginalia served various functions, they often provided a visual commentary on secular life and human folly, distinct from the primary devotional text. If women artists contributed to the illumination of these manuscripts, as historical records suggest, then their hands would have also shaped these secular or semi-secular visual narratives. The artistic output of women in the medieval period was not a monochromatic canvas of religious iconography. It was a vibrant spectrum that embraced the sacred and the secular, the devotional and the mundane. From grand tapestries depicting historical battles to delicate embroideries illustrating courtly love, from illuminated scientific texts to decorative personal items adorned with mythological figures, women artists demonstrated a broad range of thematic engagement. Their contributions transcend the narrow confines of exclusively religious subjects, enriching the visual culture of the Middle Ages with a diverse array of images and narratives that reflected the complex realities of their world. The erroneous belief that their artistic focus was solely on the divine overlooks the vastness of their creativity and the breadth of their influence on medieval art. Number 2. Erroneous belief artwork created by women was almost always unsigned or anonymously produced. The idea that medieval women artists almost always produced unsigned or anonymous works, while true for many artists of the period regardless of gender, does not fully capture the instances where women's artistic contributions were indeed recognized and even explicitly signed. While anonymity was a common practice in the medieval workshop system, where the collective effort often overshadowed individual recognition, there are notable exceptions and clear indications of female authorship that defy this generalized notion of complete obscurity. Consider the remarkable figure of Guda, a 12th century nun whose self-portrait, complete with an inscription, appears in a homiliary from the convent of Westphalian. This is not merely an attribution, it is a clear statement of authorship. The inscription reads, "Guda, sinful woman, wrote and painted this book." This direct declaration, placed within the very work she created, serves as undeniable proof of a female artist signing her work. Guda's example is significant because it is an explicit visual and textual signature, demonstrating that at least some women artists were able to claim their artistic identity and preserve it for posterity. Her act of signing reflects a conscious assertion of individual skill and contribution, challenging the widespread assumption of universal female anonymity in medieval art. Another compelling example comes from the realm of manuscript illumination. Clarissa, a lay sister in the convent of St. Ulrich and Afra in Augsburg during the late 12th or early 13th century, famously included a self-portrait swinging from the tail of a letter Q in a psalter. Although she did not sign her full name with an inscription, her depiction of herself with a bandeau on her head, a characteristic hairstyle for lay sisters, along with the uniqueness of her placement within the illuminated initial, has led art historians to recognize this as a clear artistic signature. Her playful and confident self-representation speaks volumes about her presence and perhaps her pride in her work, proving that even without a written name, a woman artist could make her individual mark. The convent of Dissabottenberg, associated with Hildegard of Bingen, provides further evidence. While Hildegard herself was a visionary and composer, not primarily a painter, the monumental illuminated manuscript Scivias Know the Ways of the Lord, which illustrates her theological visions, was created by a team of scribes and illuminators, some of whom were likely nuns under her supervision. Although individual signatures of the female illuminators of Scivias are not explicitly found, the records and the internal artistic cohesion suggest a significant female contribution to its production. The meticulous detail and complexity of the miniatures point to skilled artists working collaboratively within a context where women's artistic labor was actively supported and directed by a powerful female intellectual. Beyond explicit signatures, other forms of attribution existed. Guild records, convent documents, and patron accounts sometimes mention women by name in connection with specific artistic commissions or workshops. For example, while much embroidery was collaborative, occasionally records refer to specific women who were highly skilled and led workshops, such as the Opus Anglicanum English work, which was renowned across Europe. While many of the names of individual embroiderers are lost, the quality and fame of this work suggest highly skilled female artisans were at its core. Church treasuries and inventories occasionally listed donations or commissions made by specific women, sometimes implicitly acknowledging their role in the creation of the items. The concept of anonymous in medieval art is complex for all artists. Many male artists also did not sign their works, as art was often seen as a collaborative endeavor, a spiritual offering, or a product of a workshop rather than an individual genius. However, the existence of cases like Guda and Clarissa demonstrates that female anonymity was not absolute. These examples provide concrete proof that women artists in specific contexts found ways to assert their individual authorship. Moreover, the collective nature of convent production often meant that the signature was that of the convent itself. A manuscript produced at a particular nunnery might be known as "from the hand of the nuns of X," even if individual names were not recorded. This represents a form of collective female authorship, where the artistic output of the community of women was recognized as a whole rather than the isolated anonymity of individual contributors. The works were known to be produced by women, even if specific names were not consistently attached. For example, the artistic output of the convents of Gandersheim or Quedlinburg, while not always linked to named individuals, was recognized as emanating from these female monastic centers. The preservation of medieval art is also influenced by historical accidents. Many works, especially those on perishable materials like textiles or painted wood, have simply not survived. The ones that do are often those made for institutional use or in more durable media. The rarity of explicit signatures for women artists can also be attributed to the lower survival rate of certain types of art where women were particularly active, or to the devaluation of women's work in later historical narratives, leading to a neglect of their attribution. Therefore, while anonymity was a common characteristic of medieval artistic production for both genders, claiming that women artists were almost always unsigned or anonymously produced overlooks important historical counterexamples. The documented instances of Guda's inscription, Claricia's self-portrait, and the collective recognition of convent art prove that women artists did find ways to assert their presence and leave their mark, challenging the pervasive myth of universal female artistic anonymity during the medieval period. These specific examples provide a factual basis for understanding the nuances of artistic authorship in the Middle Ages. Number 3. Erroneous belief women artists had no access to formal training or patronage. The assertion that women artists in the medieval period lacked access to formal training or patronage is contradicted by significant historical evidence, particularly within the robust institutional framework of convents and through the initiatives of powerful aristocratic women. While women were generally excluded from secular male-dominated guilds and university education, the monastic system offered a distinct and highly effective alternative pathway to artistic training, technical skill development, and stable patronage. Convents, particularly those during the High Middle Ages, functioned as vital centers of learning, literacy, and artistic production for women. Within their walls, young women entering religious life, often from noble or wealthy families, were provided with an education that included not only religious studies but also practical skills like calligraphy, illumination, and various crafts. Scriptoriums within convents were not merely places for copying texts. They were active art workshops where nuns learned from experienced older sisters, mastering the intricate techniques of preparing parchment, grinding pigments, drawing, painting, and binding books. This apprenticeship model, passed down through generations of nuns, constituted a very real and formal training system. For example, the convent of Chelles, near Paris, was renowned for its scriptorium, where nuns produced high-quality manuscripts. The records from the 9th century show that these nuns were not only scribes but also skilled illuminators, creating intricate decorations for liturgical books. The sheer volume and consistent quality of manuscripts produced in various convents across Europe, such as those at Quedlinburg, Gandersheim, and St. Ulrich and Offera in Augsburg, demonstrate a systematic approach to artistic instruction. Nuns were taught precise techniques for drafting, applying gold leaf, and rendering figures and architectural elements, skills comparable to those learned in male monastic scriptoriums or secular workshops. This training was comprehensive, disciplined, and designed to produce works of high artistic merit for liturgical use or for other religious institutions. Patronage for women artists within the monastic system was inherently built into the structure. Abbesses, the leaders of convents, wielded significant power and influence. They were often women from aristocratic families with substantial financial resources and connections. Abbesses frequently commissioned works for their own convents, including altarpieces, liturgical vestments, illuminated manuscripts, and sometimes even architectural elements, thereby acting as direct patrons for the artists within their communities. This internal patronage system provided stability, materials, and a clear demand for artistic production by nuns. Hildegard of Bingen, the 12th century abbess of Rupertsberg and later Bingen, exemplifies powerful female patronage. While she was a visionary and composer, she directed the creation of monumental illuminated manuscripts like Civius, which illustrate her theological visions. She provided the theological content and likely supervised the artistic execution, commissioning, and supporting the nuns and possibly other artists who worked on these complex projects. Her authority and resources ensured the elaborate production of these works, which were highly influential in their time. This represents a form of patronage where a powerful woman provided the intellectual and financial framework for substantial artistic output by other women. Beyond the convent walls, aristocratic women also functioned as important patrons, both for male and female artists. Queens, duchesses, and wealthy noblewomen commissioned artworks for their private chapels, personal use, or as gifts. While they might have commissioned works from male artisans, they also supported female embroiderers, jewelers, and even scribes. For instance, Queen Matilda of England, wife of William the Conqueror, is traditionally associated with the commission of the Bayeux Tapestry, a monumental embroidered narrative. While the exact artists are debated, the scale and complexity of the work suggests significant patronage and oversight, potentially involving female artisans, given the nature of embroidery. This demonstrates that powerful women patrons facilitated large-scale artistic projects. The economic and social status of some aristocratic women also allowed them to establish and maintain workshops or provide resources for individual female artists. These women would often have personal chaplains or scribes, some of whom might have been women, creating books or devotional objects for their private use. Though less formally structured than convent workshops, these arrangements still provided a form of patronage and a pathway for artistic production. The existence of a formal apprenticeship in needlework and textile arts further challenges the notion of a lack of training. While not always institutionalized in the same way as painting guilds, the knowledge of complex embroidery techniques, dyeing, and weaving was passed down through generations within families and specialized workshops, often led by women. These skills required years of dedicated practice and instruction to master, constituting a form of practical and highly refined artistic training. Therefore, the historical record clearly indicates that medieval women artists had access to rigorous training, primarily through the structured environment of convents, where skills were systematically taught and refined. Furthermore, they benefited from robust patronage networks, both internal to monastic communities through powerful abbesses, and external through aristocratic female patrons who commissioned a wide array of artworks. These facts dismantle the erroneous belief that women artists operated without formal instruction or financial support during the medieval period. Their artistic endeavors were supported by well-established systems, allowing them to create works of profound beauty and significance. Number 4, erroneous belief women's contributions were limited to minor domestic crafts. The belief that medieval women's contributions to art were confined to minor domestic crafts is a pervasive misconception that significantly undervalues their actual artistic impact. Historical evidence demonstrates that women were actively involved in creating major works of art, including monumental textiles, elaborate illuminated manuscripts, intricate metalwork, and even some forms of sculpture. Their artistic endeavors were not limited to the small scale or the purely functional. They produced pieces of grand scale, significant artistic merit, and public display, often for religious institutions or aristocratic patrons. Illuminated manuscripts represent a powerful rebuttal to this erroneous belief. Convents across Europe were renowned centers of manuscript production, where nuns served as scribes, illuminators, and binders. These works were far from minor crafts. They were precious, labor-intensive objects requiring immense skill, precision, and artistic vision. The production of a single illuminated manuscript could take years, involving the preparation of parchment, the grinding of pigments from minerals and plants, the intricate drawing of designs, the application of gold and silver leaf, and the careful painting of miniatures. For instance, the Hortus Deliciarum Garden of Delights, a 12th century encyclopedia compiled by Herod of Landsberg, Abbess of Hohenberg, was a monumental work containing hundreds of illustrations. While the original manuscript was destroyed, surviving copies and descriptions confirm its artistic sophistication and vast scope. It contained theological, historical, and mythological images alongside detailed representations of scientific knowledge, demonstrating a comprehensive artistic undertaking by women. The sheer scale and complexity of such works elevate them far beyond mere domestic crafts. Another example is the work of Dimude, a nun at the Benedictine Abbey of Weissenbrunn in the 11th century, who copied and illuminated more than 45 volumes, including a multi-volume Bible, showing an extraordinary dedication and skill in producing large-scale and significant religious texts. Monumental embroidery is another field where women excelled, creating works that were anything but minor. The Bayeux Tapestry, though debated in its precise authorship, is widely believed to have been designed and embroidered by women, possibly within a monastic context. This incredible piece, nearly 70 meters long, narrates a historical event with vivid detail and artistic sophistication, functioning as a grand historical record and a public display of power. Its scale, narrative complexity, and artistic execution place it firmly in the realm of major art. Similarly, Opus Anglicanum, the renowned English embroidery of the High Middle Ages, was highly sought after across Europe for its exquisite detail and luxurious materials. These intricate vestments, altar cloths, and ecclesiastical hangings, often depicting complex biblical scenes or saints' lives, were largely produced by women, both in convents and in secular workshops. They were high-status works commissioned by kings, popes, and cardinals, demonstrating that women's contributions extended to the highest echelons of artistic production for public and ceremonial use. Beyond textiles and manuscripts, women were also involved in metalwork and goldsmithing, creating reliquaries, chalices, and other liturgical objects. While documentation is scarcer for individual female metalworkers, historical records and archaeological finds suggest their participation in these skilled trades. For example, some convent inventories indicate that nuns themselves crafted valuable religious objects or that women served as assistants in workshops where such items were produced. These were not simple pieces, but often elaborate works adorned with jewels, enamel, and intricate filigree, requiring specialized training and considerable artistic skill. Furthermore, women contributed to the creation of larger-scale church decorations. While men typically handled monumental fresco painting or stone carving, there are instances where women played a role. Some scholars propose that women within convents contributed to the painting of altarpieces or smaller devotional panels for their communities. Although direct evidence is limited, the artistic training available in convents would have equipped nuns with the skills necessary for such work. The Hortus Deliciarum mentioned earlier contained images that provided models for larger-scale paintings or sculptures, suggesting a broader artistic influence. The perception of women's art as minor crafts often stems from a modern bias that undervalues textiles or book arts compared to painting or sculpture. However, in the medieval period, these art forms were highly valued and considered central to artistic expression. The complexity, size, and spiritual or historical significance of works created by women demonstrate their profound artistic capabilities and their role in producing major, impactful artworks that shaped the visual and cultural landscape of the Middle Ages. The evidence clearly shows that women were not confined to simple domestic endeavors, but were active participants in the creation of grand, intricate, and historically significant pieces across various media. Number 5, erroneous belief medieval women artists were virtually non-existent. The idea that medieval women artists were virtually non-existent is a deeply ingrained misconception that fundamentally distorts the true historical picture of artistic creation during the Middle Ages. While their visibility in historical records might be less pronounced than that of male artists in certain contexts, ample evidence demonstrates that women were active, skilled, and significant contributors to the vibrant artistic landscape of the medieval period, across various media and geographical regions. They were not merely passive recipients of art or occasional dabblers, they were active producers. One of the most significant arenas for women's artistic activity was within convents and female monastic communities. These institutions served as vital centers of learning, literacy, and artistic production. Nuns often served as scribes, copying and illuminating manuscripts with exquisite detail and artistic flair. The scriptorium within a convent was a bustling workshop where women engaged in every stage of manuscript creation, from preparing parchment to binding the finished book. This was a sustained, organized, and highly skilled artistic endeavor. Consider the examples of individual women artists whose names have survived through time. Guda, a 12th century nun, famously signed her name in a homiliary she created, stating, "Guda, sinful woman, wrote and painted this book." This explicit self-identification challenges the notion of invisibility. Claricia, a lay sister from the convent of St. Ulrich and Afra in Augsburg in the late 12th century, included a playful self-portrait swinging from the tail of an initial in a psalter she illuminated. These are not isolated anomalies, they are tangible proofs of individual female authorship and artistic presence. Beyond these named individuals, the collective output of numerous convents attests to a significant presence of female artists. For instance, the nuns of the Benedictine Abbey of St. Walburga in Eichstätt produced a remarkable body of illuminated manuscripts. The nun Diemud from the Westerbrunn Abbey in the 11th century is credited with copying and illuminating over 45 volumes, including a monumental multi-volume Bible. The sheer volume and consistently high quality of these works indicate not just individual talent, but a systemic environment where women were trained and encouraged to produce art on a large scale. These monastic communities were essentially female art academies and workshops, producing works that were circulated, admired, and used throughout the medieval Christian world. Because women were also crucial to the production of textiles, particularly fine embroidery, which was a highly valued art form in the Middle Ages. The renowned Opus Anglicanum English work, celebrated across Europe for its intricate detail and luxurious materials, was largely produced by women, both in convents and in secular workshops. These were not simple domestic crafts, but elaborate liturgical vestments, altar cloths, and ecclesiastical hangings commissioned by popes, kings, and wealthy patrons. The Bayeux's Tapestry, a monumental embroidered narrative of the Norman conquest, is widely believed by many scholars to have been designed and executed by women, possibly under the patronage of Queen Matilda. The scale, artistic sophistication, and historical significance of these textile works demonstrate women's central role in a major art form. Furthermore, women participated in other artistic trades, although documentation is sometimes scarcer. Records indicate that women worked as illuminators, painters, carvers, and goldsmiths in urban centers. They might have been part of family workshops where skills were passed down from father to daughter or from mother to daughter. While male names often dominate guild records, women were sometimes listed as operating businesses, particularly after the death of a husband, or as working as assistants. These instances provide glimpses into women's involvement in secular artistic professions. The lack of consistent naming of female artists in historical records is not evidence of their absence, but rather a reflection of several factors. Artistic authorship was often collective in the medieval period, regardless of gender. Many works were created by workshops where individual contributions were not always singled out. Additionally, historical biases have often led to the underestimation or outright omission of women's contributions. Later art historical narratives, often written by men, tended to focus on male artists and institutions, overlooking the significant contributions of women, especially those in monastic settings or in less prestigious by later standards media like textiles. However, a careful examination of surviving artworks, historical documents, and the institutional structures of the medieval period reveals a robust presence of women artists. From the named scribes and illuminators to the countless anonymous hands that created magnificent manuscripts and textiles, women were integral to the visual culture of the Middle Ages. Their artistic legacy is rich, diverse, and enduring, challenging the erroneous belief that they were virtually non-existent in the realm of medieval art.